This is going to be a step-by-step walkthrough of issuing emission certificates as carbon tracker tokens using the CarbonTracker Contract to an energy utility provider that produces both electricity and natural gas. In our example, we'll use data from Sempra Energy. The energy utility is going to be selling its products, electricity and fuel, natural gas, to a building owner that then leases land space to its tenants on a square footage basis. And we're going to use the CarbonTracker system to track the embodied emissions from the upstream energy utility through to the tenants of the building owner. So we have two contracts that we're going to be discussing in this example. The net emission token contract, network contract, where we issue audit emission certificates or even offset credits or renewable energy certificates. We also have the carbon tracker token or carbon tracker contract that uses it inputs net emission tokens, but also product tokens, and it ties total emissions to amount of product produced to characterize the embodied emissions of an industry, the utility provider. So for this example, we've set up our hard hat test network running in the background, and we have this REST, an API server that's connecting the hard hat network to our front-end application that's shown here. And what we've done is we've seeded the hard hat network with several test accounts. The ones that matter to us are the energy utility, in this case Sempra, and a building owner. These are both registered as industry accounts with the net emission token network. Now what we want to do is create our first emission token or emission certificate using the two contracts for Sempra Energy. And we're going to pull from data we've compiled in this natural gas emission transfer example. Now, as I've stated, or let me just clarify, there are two steps that we need to do to first issue an emission certificate. The first step is creating an audited emission token. In this case, we'll do one for electricity production by Sempra. We have here this scope 1, 4.8 billion kilograms of CO2 from combustion linked to Sempra's production activities. We'll just assume this is combustion for the production of electricity. So once that audited emission certificate is issued, well, when we issue it, we're going to issue it to the carbon tracker address. And we have this create certificate function. We can see here we're issuing a token, our audit emission. But in this case, it's being issued to registered industry using the emission certificate or carbon tracker contract. This is the address of that contract that's been deployed on our hard hat test network. See here, we're issuing a new tracker, setting it to 0 from this address. This is the address of a registered auditor, one of these emission auditors in the hard hat test network. And we're going to issue a certificate with these the emissions to an industry. We want to issue it to this account registered with the network, Sempra Energy. This is going to be an audit emission, and as we said before, we've got these emissions from combustion. That was in billion kilograms of CO2, which is put into tons, and we're going to specify the year. In this case, 2021, from the 1st through to the end of December. Oops. We can put the description in here. We'll call it stationary combustion for electricity production. We'll add the scope and the type. Let's call it CO2 equivalent. And we can also add a description here for the source of the data for this emission using the sustainability report published by Sempra. So now what's happening here is we're both issuing a new audit emission certificate and creating a new carbon tracker token. That is done using this function we've created in the net emission token network solidity contract code called issue and track. And we'll see there are two things happening here. A new token is being issued, and then that token data is being captured, this new token, and it's being sent forward to the CarbonTracker contract address to call the track function. In this case, this issue to address is the address of the industry, Sempra. But note, when we're issuing the audit emission certificate in the first step, it's actually being issued to the tracker address. It's the CarbonTracker contract, or sorry, the CarbonTracker token that the Sempra is now going to own. And it's going to have all the information that we need for the certificate, all of the audit emission data points, and also the total product that's being produced as part of the certificate, or being linked to the certificate. In this case, electricity production. I'm going to show you that now. So we go back to our track page. We're going to look at the emission certificates requested, not yet issued. Here we see the 4.8 million tons of CO2 audit emission token or certificate here that's been put into this emission certificate with a new token ID 1. Just for identification purposes, we can add a description here. We're calling the certificate Sempra Electricity Production. We're just updating the CarbonTracker details. So now that that's been done, we have the beginnings of this certificate. Now we'll note this function that we called issue and track, it did two things at once. One could also issue the token separately and then call the track function in a second transaction to create the new certificate. This just enables this initial sequence to be done in one step. The next step in the process is, of course, to add product details to this certificate. In this case, we're going to pull from the electricity production data reported in Sempra's statistical report. We've got here 17 billion kilowatt hours of electricity. So we're going to put the product amount here, electricity production and unit. We can also add a manifest source, in this case, the statistical report. Okay, so now we should have the product data added to the certificate. We're going to go back to look at our requested certificates, and here we see the information has been added for the product. And we open the details, so we can see the electricity production and the associated emissions. Now, we could go through the process of adding additional emission data to the electricity production. In our example here, one of the other inputs we had was emissions from other producers of electricity reported by Sempra. So this would represent sort of Sempra as an intermediary buying electricity from a third party to sell to its consumers. Okay, we're not going to go through the process of adding additional emission data. I think we get the point of how it works. We just have the sort of skeleton of our certificate ready here. We can issue this one, again, by this registered auditor, so that Sempra now has this emission certificate for its electricity production. We could also go through the process of creating a new certificate, in this case, using all of the emission data, scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3 from the production and sale of natural gas. Just to show a little bit what that would look like, we can create create a new certificate. Again, issuing it to Sempra. Audit emissions. And now let's say we're going to take fugitive and vented emissions case, we have, I think that was 2 billion kilograms, 2 million tons. This would also be scope 1. So this is actually going to be from the equivalent CH4. Again, we're reporting it in CO2 equivalent. We could actually add to the metadata extra information like the GWP or greenhouse gas warming potential. And let's say we did this with an assumption of 28 times. So each molecule of CH4 we assume has a 28 times impact on a CO2 equivalent basis, methane to CO2. These are just sort of standard numbers. One could use a different GWP. We're just assuming this standard 28, which is, I think, what the IPCC uses as its recommendation. One could also take a bigger number, like I think it's 80 or 100, if we assume a shorter time frame of the global warming potential of that molecule of methane, say a 20-year period. I think it's 100 times that of CO2. Anyways. This is just to show that we can include that information as metadata of this token. So again, we're issuing our token, and now we're creating a new certificate with this token. And before we leave this page, we could actually add additional emission data. Let's, for example, add a different scope. This would be the scope 3. So this is the emissions associated with the combustion of natural gas by the consumers, by Sempra Energy's consumers. Here we have, I think, 65.3 billion kilograms or a million tons of CO2 in the same period, and we can just write this as consumption of natural gas downstream. Give this a scope 3, and we're going to call this CO2 equivalent because this is assuming the natural gas is being combusted. I can get rid of the GWP. Forgot to add the source before. We can add it on this one. Again, just the statistical report. So we should now have a new certificate in our requested queue. Okay, I see the issue. We've actually created two separate certificate requests here with the fugitive ventive emissions and another one with the downstream emissions. So that's a mistake. What I should have done was actually added the emissions to the new certificate like this, because we were actually creating a new certificate with each new emission, audited emission. So what we could do here is just, quickly add again the, let's say the fugitive emissions to this tracker. Anyways, I don't think I need to go through the process again. We get the idea. Just a little bit of a functional mistake. And again, we can add the product data here, but essentially what we should have is a certificate here with multiple audited emission tokens, and then we can start for natural gas production. And we can call it Sempra. And I'm just going to go through the steps. You guys can fast forward through this if you don't want to see it, just for clarity. Okay, so looks like we've succeeded here in adding both the scope 3 downstream emissions from natural gas produced and the fugitive vented from the total production of Sempra natural gas. Let's just add the total product quantities. Here we've measured this in therms. So we've got 10 billion therms. Let's put this source. There we go. We've got the gas and the emissions. We have the auditor issue it. Now here we have our 2 emission certificates and the associated emission factors for each. What we can do next, or what now that these certificates have been issued, the owner, the utility or Sempra, can log in with its account. Now we're logged in with Sempra's account, and it has its information about the certificates issued to it. And we have two forms here, or functions. One is to transfer the certificate, so to actually take its certificate, the entire certificate, and sell it to, say, a third party that maybe distributes its natural gas. Or it could actually transfer the products associated with its certificate to one of its consumers. So we can give an example here. So we're taking natural gas from this tracker ID 3. Product ID is 2, so this is the actual natural gas we issued to that certificate, or the auditor issued to the certificate, and we want to transfer the product to an address. Let's say, our building owner. I think in our example we actually had a quantity of natural gas. Yeah, I think it was 350 therms. Yeah, I may need to reset the we're familiar with this bug. Just need to reset account to resync with the new local hard hat test network. Okay, transfer should work now. So we just did that for the gas. So we actually see some has been drawn off the available. Some of the total natural gas has been drawn off the available. And we can do the same for the electricity. Transferring it to the same account. What was the amount? We had 10,000 kilowatts. Something wrong here. Available balance is 0. Oh, okay, yeah, the actual, this is the balance within the tracker ID owned by Sempra. So we've got all of the product there. Okay, now we should be able to log in as the building owner. I have an account already set up here. And we've got, from the drop down here, we can actually look at certificates with the product balances of this account, in this case, the building owner. Ta-da, we open it up and we have both the therms and the electricity. Now, the next step in this example will be taking the products that have been tracked through the building owner and putting them into a new emission certificate for the building owner. This certificate can then be used to transfer the embodied emissions through to the tenants in the building based on their total floor space. I can run through these steps in a following video. I'm going to cut this short here because I got to step out.